Hello, beautiful Vix.
Hi.
Hello, beautiful Forest members as well. This is as always, Vix and I are it's like the first interview that I do for many of my programs is with this beautiful human. So Vix is otherwise known as New Age Hipster, and we've been friends for 3 years.
Something like that.
And like that. When were you in Australia?
Can't remember because I've done so many trips back over the years.
Yeah.
Maybe 2016.
Yeah.
Might have even been like 4 years now.
Yeah. And I'm really excited to talk to you because you, for me, and this is going to sound super gushy, but I'm just going to do it anyway. You're very inspiring to me because you are an author, and not only have you written a spiritual based book, but you've written some YA novels, and you're writing the third in a trilogy of your YA series, which is just the best. And I thought it would be really wonderful to talk to you about what it's like to be a writer and what it's like to express your voice and those sorts of things. So I'm just kind of setting up, this is what we're going to talk about today. You may hear Harry in the background because he's just decided to have his dinner. So hopefully maybe he'll want to get as part of the call. But before I keep on like just rambling on, Vix, could you tell us a little bit about you and how it's so beautiful and sunny where you are and it's super dark?
Beautiful and sunny, I don't think so. Well, actually, it does kind of look like the sun's coming out a little bit. So I'm originally from Australia, but I live in the UK, and we're just moving into autumn now. So we're having all the dark feels presently. So a little bit about me for anyone who hasn't met me before. I'm Vix, and I run a business called New Age Hipster. And I've been running that business now since about, oh gosh, I don't even know when, about 5-6 years, maybe even getting on to 7 years since I kind of started really sowing the seeds. It was like 2012 when I started to kind of get back into my spiritual practices. So that's kind of been the big journey from there. But in my business at the moment, most of my work is teaching spiritual development, and I do that through a group called The Circle. And I also teach online classes as well. There's a lot of like self-study classes, and just recently done a tarot in a day course. And I also run a business mastermind supporting other people who kind of feel the call to run a spiritual business. And I'm a writer.
Yeah.
I write books, which is, just hearing you say that at the beginning when you're like, oh, I want to talk to you about, I can't remember what words you used, but something about like, what's it like to be a writer? And it just kind of like hits me in the heart to hear that, because it's been a really long time of wanting to be a writer, like putting that on the vision board and manifesting this for a really long time, and just kind of saying, I want to write books, and I want to be a writer, and I want to be a writer, I want to be a writer. And now it's like, now we're sitting here having this conversation about, hey Vix, what's it like to be a writer? And it just kind of feels like, oh my gosh, I've made it. not that you ever make it, but it's like I've achieved something that I have been kind of working towards for a long time, and that feels good. It feels like a relief, honestly.
Well, it's it's a tick. It's not a tick box, but it's it's incredible when you can sit back and realize something that you put your mind to or you put your body to for so long, and that you actually achieve that. We were sending a few messages back and forth over the weekend, and 20 years on from the Paralympics, the realization. I mean, it took me probably 15 years to kind of to have the realization, but really 20 years to let it actually sink in, because it is, when you're working through like a big goal, one of the things I feel is that you're so in it that you don't realize what you're achieving in that moment.
Yes.
Yeah. And it is hard to stay present.
Yeah. Especially with with the work that we do, because it's like we're constantly creating content, we're constantly creating things, and it's like you create one thing and you put it out and you tell everyone, hey, come and like check this thing out, and like as you're marketing that thing, you're already working on the next thing. So it's like you're always kind of like looking ahead at like, what am I going to do next? What's the next step? What's the next project? What's the next thing that I'm going to create?
And your human design, I think, is a manifesting generator. Is that right?
I'm just a generator.
Or you're just a generator?
I'm just a generator. That's, just a regular old generator.
But still like amazing to me, because my projector is like, how does she do all this work, and how do you, oh my gosh, I need to sleep 7 hours.
Yeah, I'm just sitting in my office just generating, making more stuff. That's
and I'm just how my mother to numb out. How did you, this is actually the question that kind of came to me. It was like really early this morning, because I'm constantly thinking about the forest and everything at the moment, and I haven't actually written on my list, so I'm going to drop one in straight away that we haven't talked about. But how did you know, or like when did you know that you were intuitive? Because I don't think we've ever talked about that.
It's a really good question. I think it depends on what you mean by intuitive. Because a lot of people have these stories of, they were a kid and they saw grandma at the foot of their bed, or they had some angel visitation, or all of these things that lots of people have as part of their origin story. And I don't have any of that. Not that I remember consciously anyway, maybe it happened, but it's certainly not a part of my story. I never really felt like I was psychic or intuitive. Like, those are never words that I would have used to describe myself until really very recently. And even now, when I call myself an intuitive, it's kind of a bit like, what is this even, like, what am I even saying when I'm calling myself intuitive? And I think psychic is even more of one of those words that's like, what does that even mean? Because a lot of people think psychic just means, well, you can see the future, and that's it. Whereas to me, I feel like psychic and intuitive is really, really similar, and it's really just about being able to, I think intuitive for me is just being able to really like tune into the energy of yourself, tune into the energy of a situation, and work out what's really going on. But I don't know if I ever really felt like I could do that until really like only when I got kind of back on my spiritual path in about 2012, and then went on this kind of long journey of learning how to protect my energy, like finding out that I was an empath, and working out what that was all about, and then kind of practicing all of these tools and learning these things, all these spiritual tools and everything that can kind of help you to start to tune into that voice and start to kind of tune into energy. And I think, for a long time, I would describe myself as being sensitive to energy for a long, long time. Like my whole life I felt sensitive, but I think sensitive and intuitive is different, because you can be sensitive to everything and just be freaking out all the time, because it's just like, this is too much. I can't handle this. I can't handle that person's energy. I can't be in a room with those people. But you're not really using that information to like make a good choice for yourself. Whereas when you're intuitive, I think you're picking up on what's going on in a room, and you're like, okay, the best thing for me is to leave this room, or the best thing for me is to get in my bubble or ground myself or do something so that I can be present in this situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense, because I know what you mean, because I feel like I've had both of those experiences. You go into a shopping centre and you'll come home and you'll feel really crappy, but you'll do a reading with someone, you'll still be it's sensitive to energy, but you're able to interpret what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Two kind of sides to it, and it's
Yeah.
really interesting, even watching young children that don't know how to interpret the energy, but they're super sensitive to it. So it's, it's that, or even, as a teenager, that emotional roller coaster experience of, I don't know why I feel like this, but I do. Yeah. And you, like a lot of the work that you do aside from writing books and teaching is you do a lot of like tarot readings and interpreting that kind of stuff, but it's much more from an intuitive space. Like I remember you went through a bit of a kind of transformation in the sense that you would read the cards, but then they changed to a much more kind of intuitive space where you got the messages from. You were still using the tarot, but it was much more from, I don't know, when I describe my intuition, it's like a heart space thing. Is that the same for you, or is that, tell us a little bit about that kind of experience?
Yeah, so I don't know how to explain it really, because it's like how do you really explain this stuff? But for a long time, when I first started reading tarot, I was doing very kind of like traditional tarot readings where people would come and they'd ask the traditional kind of questions. Should I take this job? Should I quit my job? Should I leave my partner? All of this kind of, should I do this? Should I do that kind of questions that you do tend to get a lot when you start reading, and a lot of people have those questions. So it's kind of working with that kind of way of doing readings. And, I was kind of rephrasing people's questions, being like, instead of should you leave your partner, let's look at, what you most need to know about your relationship right now. And then we can start to have a look at what's going on. But the more that I read the tarot, the more that all this other stuff started coming through. So, someone would come with a question about their partner, and I'd kind of start doing, okay, well, let's look at the energy of the relationship. And then suddenly I'd start getting like past life stuff would come in, and like, okay, so you've actually had a past life with this person, and this is why you're having this difficulty. And, now you're in a situation where in this life you can choose whether or not to be with this person, but, you've got to learn the lessons. And so like all of this kind of stuff would start coming through. And then as well as the past life stuff, other things would come through like, oh, this is part of a soul contract that you need to fulfill, and you've just got to learn this lesson. Or, people would ask about work, and it would suddenly turn into, well, what you're doing right now isn't in alignment with your life purpose. So this isn't really about this job. It's about what do you want to be doing with your life to feel fulfilled and feel like you're fulfilling your mission and all of that kind of stuff. But in terms of like where that comes from, it's like, I don't know. To me, when I'm doing a reading for someone in that space, like it feels like it's coming from like their higher self. So I always do this little thing when I start a reading where I kind of, tune into my guides and angels and my higher self, and then I call in their guides and angels and their higher self. And it's like the energy just feels like it goes up here. And then I feel like my higher self up here is having a conversation with their higher self. And it's just like, kind of like this kind of rainbow thing, that kind of an energetic kind of rainbow. And it's like, oh, just like passing all of that in for them. So yeah, that's kind of how it feels when I do a reading. But then there's also that, and when I read for myself, like I go up there and I bring down that stuff from that perspective. But then other times I read for myself and it does feel like it's more coming from within, like it's coming from the heart space. But in terms of like, what's the difference between reading from your heart space and reading from your higher self? I mean, is there even really a difference? Sometimes I like to just visualize in meditation, like, my higher self, my soul star, whatever you want to call this connection that you have with the highest part of yourself. Sometimes I just like visualize that coming and sitting in my heart, and then I do a reading from there. And it's like, is it different, or is it sometimes your soul hangs out in your heart, sometimes your soul's up here? I don't know. I kind of feel like it really is all coming from the same place. It's just like it's coming through in a different way. I guess a way to describe it is like, you can pick up your phone and you can look at Instagram on your phone, or you can look at Instagram on your laptop, or you can go to someone else's phone and look at, you know, your iPad or whatever. There's all these different ways of accessing like the same information.
See,
That's kind of how it feels.
Because people, I feel like they get, when you first begin your intuitive, like, or it's, you know, adventure or whatever that you want to call it, sometimes people get stuck thinking it has to come a certain way, and there are, you know, all the clairs, the clairvoyant, sentient, audient, you know, cognizance and all that kind of stuff, but it's, people get stuck on that it has to come from here, or you'll have to feel it in your gut, or you have to, you know, have that beautiful rainbow experience. But it's so individual. It's interesting, you know, going back to human design, you know, when I worked out that I was a projector and that I was splenic, and now I understand why I feel so much of my knowing in my gut, because it's in my spleen. But when you have a splenic intuition in human design, it's one of those things where the information comes in really quickly and it goes out straight away. So I have to speak it. Whereas a lot of the people that I've worked with, they are able to hold the conversation for much longer and go back to pieces of information, where I find that really hard. So it is just so much about, you know, the individuality of what we do in this work.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I think that especially when you're starting out, like, you know, you hear about one person's experience with how they read cards or how they tune into their intuition, and if yours doesn't feel like that, it can just feel like, well, that's not my intuition then, or that's not, you know, it's not right, or whatever. Because there, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, you know, that gut feeling, like I just felt it in my gut, like I just knew in my like, you know, in my belly, I just knew that it wasn't the right thing, or it was the right thing. Whereas you know, I don't tend to get the gut feeling that much. But you know, as like in my chart, I'm all like air and a bit of water and hardly any earth, like in my chart. So everything for me is like, it's all about thoughts and feelings. So it's like, I just feel like this is the right thing to do, or I just know this is the right thing to do, rather than like, I felt it in my gut. But we're all different. Like you said, we're all different, and we're all connecting with this stuff in whatever way works for us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what does a day in the life of Vix look like when you're working in New Age Hipster? And the reason I'm asking this question is because I feel like sometimes people have an idea of what our work looks like. And I often talk about, you know, that I do a lot of it from my bed, but that's not what most people do. That's just my style. Or maybe lots of people do it. But, you know, is it... you know, you were a teacher, you were a special ed teacher, and then you went into being a small business owner. So do you work full time, or is it kind of a part-time, a couple of days a week, and are you booked out? Like, what kind of experience can you share with us?
Yeah, so it's like, I guess with most of us who are doing this work, it's different all the time. And pretty much like most of this year has been really intense. I wrote the book, Which Please, I wrote that in February. And then there was a lot of like, you know, conversations back and forth and going through rounds of edits and things like that. Just emails back and forth about, you know, so many different things, you know, what do you think of the cover, you know, all of this kind of stuff. So it was a pretty busy start to the year. And then I started working on a second secret project, which I can't tell anyone about yet, but hopefully I can tell people soon. And so that's been really taking up a lot of my time and energy this year. So it really has been like a full-time job this year. Whereas like last year, things were, you know, I wasn't doing all these kind of extra projects and everything. So I was kind of working more part-time last year, and, you know, probably doing like 3 full-time days a week, and then having a couple of days where I do little bits and pieces, and then, you know, work on my fiction stuff and other things. So I'm kind of in a place now where I'm trying to go back to doing part-time so that I can fit in a bit more fiction stuff. But, you know, in terms of like, what does a day look like? I love this question because when I was starting my business, I really had this idea that it was going to be all like, you know, on Instagram, when you see everyone who's like, hashtag like entrepreneur life, and they're like standing on top of a mountain, and it's like, oh my God, did they even do any work today? And it hasn't really been, I mean, there's been moments that have been like that. And I've got, you know, a couple of pictures on my Instagram of me standing on top of a mountain, but it doesn't happen very often. Most of the time it's just work. It's like, I get up in the morning, I do my spiritual practice every morning. Like that's the first thing I do to set myself up for the day. And then I check emails, and then I check social media and I see what's going on. I post something on social media. And then I'm creating content for my groups and my courses. And yeah, it's like, you know, it's a lot of admin I'm paying taxes. I'm like, you know, all of this stuff that I kind of, when I started out, it wasn't like I was completely naive and I didn't think I'd have to do any of that stuff, but there was definitely this feeling of like, oh, I get to spend my days just doing tarot readings, and like people will just appear out of nowhere and they'll suddenly know how to find me and they'll book in for readings, and I'll just be doing readings, and then I'll be taking a break and having a cup of tea, and like, you know, but it's been pretty, you know, it is still a job, and it's a job that I love. Like I love it dearly, and I'm so grateful that I get to do this work. But, you know, it's not really as glamorous as sometimes it might look on social media. And like, you know, you said you work in your bed. Like I work, this is my office. Like I sit in here pretty much all day, every day, and I'm just on the laptop replying to people's messages, emailing people, creating content. Like, you know, it's still a job. It's a great job. It's a great job. But yeah, I think I was kind of, I don't really know what I was expecting. I did have this one kind of like vision of me walking around the house in like a pair of fluffy slippers, and that like I'd just be just walking around like watching daytime TV, and then like the phone would ring and I'd answer the phone and be like, hi, like it's your local psychic here, and they'd be like, hey, can I get a reading? I'm like, sure. And then they'd do like this reading over the phone, and then they'd be like, that's amazing, and I'd hang up and be like, cool, now I can get back to watching TV. And it's like, I don't know where I got this like little vision from, but I think it was probably from, I don't know, some 80s movie or something that I'd seen once, where it was like, you know, this is the day in the life of a psychic. And to be honest, it was a little bit like that when I worked for the psychic hotlines like years and years ago.
That's so amazing, that story.
Yeah, we can talk more about that if you want. But, you know, now it's like, it's a lot of be on social media, do some marketing, write a newsletter, tell people that you exist, tell people that, you know, you have these offerings, all this stuff that, you know, I didn't think about. I thought I was just going to be a tarot reader, and I thought I would just put my readings up online and people would find them and I'd be booked out and that would be it. I didn't really realize until I'd started putting myself out there that actually, I need to somehow get people to find out that I'm doing this.
The most regular kind of work that we do, I think, as business owners is marketing ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, getting the Trello board out and, you know, smashing out, you know, the posts. And, you know, I used to spend time, you know, pre-posting things so that it was all automated, but I don't do that anymore. I kind of just, I wanted to work in a more intuitive way, but it is definitely, you know, having to remind people why they should be booking in with you, or why you're the person that can help them. As a side question, do you get dressed every day to go to work?
Yes.
Oh, that's so good. I knew you were going to say that.
I do. I often like will check so I don't check in with social media every single day. Like this is my aim, and most of the time I'm pretty good with this, but I try to only check in with because I have a whole bunch of groups on Facebook, and a lot of like, and you know, I'm in this really great place with my business too, where I get a lot of comments now which is really, really great. Like, it's amazing that to have like so many people comment on your posts, but I can't reply to those comments like every single day because it takes quite a while. So I only do the social media and the comment stuff on Monday, Wednesday and Friday.
Amazing.
So that's my, so those are kind of like my big admin days. And then I have Tuesday and Thursday as kind of like the creative days where I just check my email. I see what needs actioning there and then I'm just in creative zone for the day, which works really well for me at the moment. And these things are always like evolving and changing, but that's kind of what works for me now. But yeah, so there will be days when I'll do my spiritual practice and I'm still in my pajamas when I do that. And then I'll check my emails and I'll see what's going on and I'll be like, okay, cool. At the moment, my routine really is like check email most days, see if there's anything urgent. And then I'll go and do some exercise. Like I've been doing beach body.
Yeah.
I'm like, beach body on demand is like not the name I would have chosen for it. But it's been really good, especially in lockdown, because I don't like, I work from home. I don't go out. I'm not like out going for a run every day, especially like in this weather. So I do like a workout video and then I have a shower and then I get dressed, even though I often wear just like leggings or tracksuit bottoms or whatever. Like I'm not getting dressed up every day and I'm not doing my hair and makeup every day, but I do have a shower and I put on real clothes. Yeah. That's the glamorous like that's it. I do wear real clothes every day, even if it's like tracksuit bottoms.
Well, I think that's very inspiring. I had a shower this morning and washed my hair and put my pajamas back on.
I love it, but it's whatever works for you, right?
Yeah. Well, I like to use the excuse. I'm still only like 4 days post cortisone, so I'm allowed to rest up, aren't I?
Yeah.
It's just, I think that's actually just an excuse for not, getting dressed properly. But anyway, so tell us a little bit about, like, did you always want to be an author?
No. I mean, kind of, yes. I always loved stories. And when I was a kid, I was always like writing stories or writing like, it was like this little comic that I used to write. I used to like write my own comics and I used to read like a lot of Babysitter's Club and then try to write my own versions of that kind of stuff, when I was pretty young. But my big dream was to be an actor, to be on Neighbours. That was my dream. I think I've told you this story before. But I basically wanted to be Kylie Minogue. Like I wanted to be on Neighbours and get really famous on Neighbours. And then I wanted to get into music and I wanted to be in musicals. And that was kind of like my big dream for a really long time. So I actually, when I finished school, I went backpacking and did, the whole like going to go find myself thing for quite a few years. And then I ended up at theatre school. And so I did that for a few years. And that was like, that was the big dream, was to be a performer. And by the time I finished theatre school, I was kind of just like really burnt out by it. And I was just like kind of disillusioned as well. It was like, do I really want to, like, yes, I want to be a performer, but do I want to put myself through everything that you have to go through in order to kind of, I went to some auditions and I was just like, do I want my life to be sitting in waiting rooms for auditions, going into rooms and just having them be like, no, you're too tall, you're too this, you're too whatever, and I was just kind of like, I don't know if this is for me actually. And so that's when I got into teaching. So I did drama and English teaching to start with, and then I retrained to do special needs teaching. So yeah, like the writing part was kind of I don't know, like it was always there. Like I always loved writing, and I taught English for a couple of years, and while I was teaching English, we read a lot of books in English class. I read Twilight around that time as well, and I was like, I could totally write a book. Like I love Twilight, but it's not, there's nothing about it that's like
literary masterpiece. masterpiece.
Yeah, like it did make me feel like I could, maybe I could write a book. And that was kind of the, the seeds being sown for the first fiction book. But yeah, I mean, I dabbled with writing for a long time, but it's interesting with writing, especially with fiction writing, that so much of what you do to prepare to write a novel, and even in creation of a novel, is really the same as acting. It's like you're creating these characters, you're understanding what drives them, you're telling a story, like you're a part of the storytelling. And it's really the same thing. It's just that instead of you putting the costume on and you going on stage, you're writing the story from kind of behind the scenes. But it's all kind of, I don't know, it's all kind of the same stuff. Like so much of what we learn at drama schools helped me with my writing so much. So yeah, so to answer your question, no, I didn't always want to be a writer, but I always wanted to tell stories.
Yeah.
That's probably the answer to that, the very short answer to that question.
No,
I always wanted to tell
stories. And so when you wrote, or when you, I guess, got the opportunity to write Witch Please, was that a little bit, I mean, obviously it's different because it's not really it's stories, but it's not stories. It's much more an information-based book. And so how was that experience different?
It was so different. It was so different. I wrote Witch Please in a month.
Oh my God.
And my first fiction book took me 10 years between, like, I mean, it wasn't like 10 years of sitting down every day and writing. It was like, a lot of time off and on over the time. But from the first day, I kind of sat down and I was like, oh, I've got this idea for this time travel novel. And, when it was finally published and available for other people to read, it was about 10 years. But yeah, Witch Please, I wrote it in a month. So it's a very different experience. But so much of Witch Please is just everything that I've been teaching for these last, couple of years. Is everything that I've already been talking about this stuff like all day, every day, in all my work with New Age Hipster. So it was really just a matter of sitting down and writing down everything that I've been telling everybody, in my YouTube videos and in my courses and in my spiritual development teaching and everything. It's like, I'm just writing this down now for everyone, for all the times I've had these conversations about how do you protect your energy and how do you ground yourself and how do you connect with spirit guides. So it came through pretty quickly, which was lucky because, they only gave me a month to write it. So it was like, okay, it's going to come through quickly. But yeah, it was a really, really different experience. And yeah, it was very, very quick. Obviously there was, some rounds of edits and some things that we needed to fix up and typos and, all of that kind of stuff. But there wasn't actually a lot. There wasn't a lot to change. And that was something that I felt really concerned about as well, doing, writing a book with a big publisher, because my two novels that I've written, I self-published them. So I think I didn't even get a professional editor to work on those books. I had a lot of friends and beta readers read them. So I had a lot of feedback, but there was no like professional editing. Whereas, it was a daunting process to like write all this stuff and then just like send it to the publisher and be like, what do you think of this? Because you hear all these stories as well of people who, and this is like a great conversation to have sometime, maybe not today, but the pros and cons of self-publishing versus traditional publishing, because you do hear all these stories about people who go into traditional publishing and the publisher just wants to rip apart everything that they submit. It's like, we don't want this, we want you to write something completely different. So, I was like, oh God, like, what are they going to think? But most of it was just like, can we just move these bits around and, shorten this bit and, things like that. So yeah, but yeah, it's completely different process. And there's something, I don't know, like it's my second fiction book didn't take nearly as long. It took about a year from like no words on the page to being published and in people's hands. It took about a year to do that second book. But that's, you know, the fiction stuff has always been like a side hustle to New Age hipster. So I haven't been able to just sit down and be like, hey, I'm a, you know, full-time fiction writer. Like, that's not my life. So when I say a year, you know, if I've been doing that full time, it probably would have been, you know, half that, maybe even less. But yeah, a really, really, really different, a really different experience.
Yeah. And how do you write so many words? Like, how do you, like, I mean, I'm coming from my point of view really, like, as well, because I'm writing a YA novel at the moment. And well, I should say that I have started a YA novel, but I stopped a little bit during lockdown because it just didn't feel like it was flowing. How do you keep the momentum going with something like big like that? Oh no, you're frozen. Yeah. Okay, we just dropped out a little bit then, but Vix, could you follow on with your answer? How do you write so many words? How do you achieve something like that?
Yeah, I think like writing a good book is hard, but so many people don't get enough words on the page that like you have something to work with. So for me, like my first draft is always a complete mess. And at the moment I have a first draft of my final book in this Santolsa saga. I've got the first draft, but the first draft is like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Almost Famous. And this boy for anyone who hasn't seen it, this boy goes around and he does all these interviews with this band. And at the end, he goes to the Rolling Stone office and he's just got this bag of like little bits of paper. And like, there's like, I wrote on this piece and here's a receipt with some notes down. And it's like, that's sort of what my first draft is like. It's like just a bag of bones. And so then like the second draft is like, okay, which bones actually fit in with this skeleton and how do they kind of go together? Do they fit together? How can we make this turn into like, you know, a skeleton? And then the next step is like, okay, let's get some flesh on the bones. And, you know, like that's sort of how it feels to me writing. So for me, the first draft is just like words on the page, and it does not matter how good or how bad they are. It does not matter if they never even make it into the book. It's just about words getting out. And the more words that I write, even if they don't make any sense and they're not going to be in the book, the more good stuff comes out. So it's like, you got to get the stuff out so the good stuff can come out. Yeah. Because for most writers, like you're not going to sit down at the laptop and be like, okay, I'm going to write chapter 1 and just sit there and suddenly, you know, it was a dark and stormy night and this is like your perfect chapter and this is exactly how it's going to be. One of the things I like to do is I like to write from all over the place. So I don't tend to really start at the beginning. I start with what's the scene that's in my mind right now? What's the scene that needs to be written? So I write all over the place. Like I'll write a bit from the middle. I write the ending before I've even like thought about how this book is going to start. And then it's like, you know, fill in the gaps and make it all kind of make sense. But in terms of just like getting yourself to sit there and write, something that I found really useful over the years is to be a part of NaNoWriMo, which is short for National Novel Writing Month. And they do these programs all over the year. So November is like the main one. And basically it's just a bunch of people saying, I'm going to write 50,000 words in a month. And you know, you just sign up and you get like these little graphs and you put in like, how many words did you write today? And they have all these forums and all of this great content, and they send you pep talks, like, don't give up, like you can do this, lots of advice. And then they do it a couple of other times in the year as well. But for me, I find that really, really useful because it's like, it gives you a structure and it helps you to get disciplined. And I know this is a word that people don't often like to use or to think about, the word discipline. But if you're trying to do something like write a book, you're going to need some discipline, because this is why my first book took me 10 years, because I didn't have any discipline. Yeah. And I wasn't thinking I'm going to write, you know, every weekend until it's done. It was like, I'll just write whenever I feel like it. and then it takes 10 years. And I think so many people can relate to that with their projects, whether it's writing or learning an instrument or learning tarot or, you know, doing online courses or whatever it is that we're doing. It's like, if you don't have that discipline and you haven't set that intention of like, actually, I really want to do this, like, you know, it just becomes another thing that never gets finished. I often think about how many people have started a novel and not finished it. And when I finished my first novel and I self-published it and I had it in my hands, there was such a sense of like, I'm one of the people that did it. Of all the people who are out there with a novel sitting on their computer, like half started or whatever, it's like, I finished this, I did this, I made this happen. And that was almost better than, you know, any of the reviews or what anybody said about the book. It's just like, I did it, I made it happen.
I love that.
I think that's I think that's like, you know, that's how we get anything done in life. And I'm sure you can relate to this with all the, you know, things that you've achieved in your life. It's like, you have to show up and you have to make it happen.
You absolutely have to show up. Even,
yeah,
you know, it's interesting. I think, you know, a lot of the narrative sometimes these days is, if you're not feeling it, like it's, you know, it's a bit of that spiritual bypassing, like, oh, if it's not meant to be, then don't do it. But that just, this is going to sound really bad, that I believe just creates really soft people, because life will give you moments that are where you have to push yourself, where your back is up against the wall and you have to make a decision. And the most loving act that you can do in that moment is to make a decision that is best for you. And maybe it is sometimes, oh, it's all too hard, you need to not do it. Like, that's completely fine too. But are you too scared to say yes to yourself? That's the question. I think that, you know, I want more people to ask that question. You know, swimming was really a wonderful experience for me, but it was really bloody hard. Like, I was driving down King Street in the city in Melbourne, where all the nightclubs were at, you know, 4:30 in the morning, most mornings. And people my age were coming out of the nightclubs and I was going to training with my beanie on, you know, and if we were later than 5:10, we would get locked out. You'd have to just turn around and go home. And so it's, what is that? What is your big desire? Are you willing to give yourself that gift of achieving it?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I think there is definitely a trend in spirituality and personal development and self-help, whatever, where, I mean, because I think, because we kind of have been, and, you know, we can talk about the divine masculine, the feminine and everything, and it's like people are really wanting to move back into more balance, but so many of us are going so far into the feminine that we're now becoming these sort of people who, like, a big thing for me is I do my spiritual practice every single morning, even whether it's whether I do a big thing and I'm doing Kundalini class and doing like mantras and, you know, all the thing, or whether I just sit down and I say, like, you know, my basic prayers and I do a little bit of energy work, and that's kind of like my baseline of, this is the absolute minimum that I ever do of my spiritual practice. But I do that every single day. And people often say to me, like, oh, you know, I can't do that. And it's like, why can't you just, you know, pull one card for yourself every day? And it's like, oh, some days I just, you know, couldn't do that. And it's like, I know sometimes with, you know, where we're at with our mental health and our, you know, we do have to look after ourselves. But it's like, there is this trend of, well, if you're not feeling it, don't do it. It's like, if you don't really feel like going, you know, you don't really feel like turning up for a yoga class, then it's okay if you don't go. And I think sometimes that is true. It's like, if you really have to choose between what is the best thing I can do for myself right now, do I just need to look after my mental health and go home and rest? Or is it just that I'm not feeling it and I can't be bothered?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally, and, you know, I guess I'm going to say is, I mean, I don't know much of your experience, because I've never really talked about it, but like, I know that I've had substantial trauma in my life. And so I know that if some kind of trauma situation is coming up that's not enabling or empowering me to take action towards something, that's okay. But I could just be being lazy.
Yeah.
I could be letting myself off the hook. You know, it's been really interesting in lockdown for me. because I do have a fear of over exercising because my body is not like it used to be. And so my friend Rose, she was like, why don't you just try this MK Fit 20 seconds or 30 seconds on, 10 seconds off, this exercise thing. And it's like to bad 90s music on YouTube. And I'm like, all right, I'll give it a go. She's like, I reckon you'll be able to do it. Just do it from your wheelchair. You don't have to do, like, obviously you can't do squats. So just do what you can. And she's like, sometimes I do it, but I can't do the moves. So I just dance around my lounge room. And just doing those classes, allowing myself 23 minutes every second day was such a liberating experience. And it was this act of self-love where I would set the time, the meeting time that was a non-negotiable. And there were moments when the universe tested me. Oh, come for dinner at that time, or come over, I'm going to pop over. And I'm like, no, you can't, and I would say I have a client. Because in that moment I was being the client for myself.
Yes.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, I just said to my husband on day before, I was kind of in that place of, well, I'd been doing a bit of exercise and feeling really sore, and I was kind of like, oh, I don't know, like, oh, should I do some yoga today or not? And he was just like, just do it, because you always say you feel better afterwards. He's like, you should just do it, because it always makes you feel better. And I was like, yeah, okay. And so I did, and guess what? I felt better afterwards. And it's like, I know for me, there's that, I still go into those old patterns of like, oh, maybe the best thing for my body is not to do this, and maybe I should just rest and do nothing today. Maybe that is the best thing. And sometimes you just need someone else to be like, yeah, but you always feel better when you do get out and when you do your classes and you do that stuff. And it's like, yeah, I do. So why am I still, holding on to those old stories of, oh, I just need to like just sit around and do nothing. And like you said, yeah, but sometimes it is, sometimes you are going through a really hard time, and it's like, you don't need to add all this stuff onto your to-do list. You just need to get through whatever's going on for you. But yeah, I feel like this is just like, seeing it more and more of just like people just being like, oh no, I wasn't feeling aligned to that today, so I didn't do it. Or like, I was just feeling like I needed to sit on the couch and watch Netflix all day, so that's what I did. Like one day is cool, but then it's like 6 days in a row. It's like, okay, like we're all gonna do what feels right for us. But I'm here for the balance. Like I'm here for let's bring the masculine, feminine, whatever you want to call those energies, into balance, and let's have a beautiful like experience where we're showing up and we're doing the work, doing the inner work, and we're doing the work in the world as well.
Yes. Well, we're here. It's our purpose, right? We're here to share of ourselves in this, in this lifetime. And I'm going to segue to another question, because me and you jumped onto Instagram. I reckon it was maybe in April. It was during lockdown, and we jumped on and talked about cancel culture. And then you posted a post on Instagram, I think maybe last week or something, about the same thing. And I love this topic. Not that I love the fact that it's happening, but I love the topic, because one of the questions that I wanted to ask you was, what advice do you have for others expressing their truth, like expressing their story and stuff? And I feel like cancel culture and expression really come hand in hand, because the more that cancel culture gets legs, the more people are fearful to say, well, lovingly, I don't agree with you, or, that doesn't really work for me. Even having conversations like this could be seen that we're two white women who are privileged, who don't understand what it's like to have a day where you need to be sitting in front of Netflix all day. If there's such an undertone of, there can be such an undertone of, but that person doesn't get me, so I'm just going to shut them out. But I would hope that no one would ever think that I was not wanting to get them. I was just expressing a different point of view, which and cancel culture is, it's just really prevalent at the moment, I feel.
Yeah, there's like this like I've felt this a lot, where like you can't say anything on social media these days without somebody saying, oh, but what about, what about X, Y, Z, and what about this, and what about that? A couple of times I've posted things recently. I'm just trying to think of an example. I mean, one of the things is that I'm vegan, and I post about that, probably not as much as I'd like to, because I know that it pushes people's buttons. But every time I do post something about veganism, I get, all the people that are like, but what about, what about people who can't do it? And what about people who live in the food desert? And what about people who, live in a tribe in like Mongolia and they can't be vegan? It's like, I'm not saying that everybody, it's like, I didn't say, like, there's only so many characters that you have on an Instagram post, right?
Yeah.
Or in a story, you've only got 15 seconds. And it's like, you can't just put, like, every time I post about veganism, I can't just put this massive disclaimer that's like, but if this isn't an option for you because of these following reasons, and this massive list of like, if you have health issues, or if this, or, if you're gluten-free and you're finding it difficult, it's like, I'm just here expressing my, sharing my truth. And my truth is that, this is me, and this is how I live my life. But it's like, I know people have like cancelled me because of sharing about being a vegan. And it's like, okay, like, we're in a different place, we're disagreeing about this, maybe you can't be vegan, whatever. But it's like, do we have to cancel each other? Do we have to unfollow people just because, they've shared something that didn't have like 1,000 disclaimers on the bottom? One thing I shared was like, just some post about, we could choose joy, something as simple as that. And then people were like, well, you can't choose joy if you've got mental health issues, and it's not always a choice for people. And it's like, okay, it's like, again, it's just like, I had not a lot of space to fully be able to express everything that I meant by this post. But it's like, people are so looking for a fight right now. Like, I feel like that's really the energy on social media. Is like, anytime somebody sees something that they're like, oh, but I can't do this, or but I couldn't do this, it's like they just want to jump on it, and they just want to like, and the problem is, I think, is that we're not having conversations, we're just jumping on each other. It's like, for all those times that I've shared something that, I haven't been able to put all the disclaimers into the into the description. It's like, if someone just commented and just said, oh, hey, like, seen all your vegan posts, but, I'm in a situation where I've got a health issue, or this or that, and just wanted to, kind of let there's people out there that can't do it for whatever reason. And then I'd be like, yeah, cool, I'm aware of this, like, it's all about just doing your best, whatever. But it's like, there's no conversations. It's just like, oh, I'm canceling you. And I've had this before. I think we've talked about this before, where people have just commented and been like, I'm so disappointed in this post, I'm unfollowing this account. Yeah. And it's like, okay, like, okay, thanks for the conversation. But I feel like we're really missing an opportunity here to like have conversations and to teach each other about these things, because there are things that people don't think about, there are things that people don't know about, there are things that I might post something, well, everything I post is from my perspective of my life and my experience. I can't post from the perspective of every single person on this planet, because I'm not every single person on this planet. I'm just me, and I can only share what is true for me in my experience. But if somebody, sends me a DM or comments and says, hey, I wanted to make you aware of this, or just so your post upset me or affected me because this is my situation and this is how I read this. And it's like, oh, okay, let's have a conversation about that. Let's learn from each other, and let's, not make the same mistakes again. But it's like, people don't want to help educate each other. People don't want to have the conversations. Whereas I'm just like, you know what, if I post something that's problematic, like, just send me a DM and just be like, hey babe, like, you posted this thing and it was kind of like a bit awkward because, for whatever reason. And then, there's an opportunity for me to learn, but also an opportunity for me to then share with my community, hey, somebody drew, somebody told me about this and I wanted to share it with you and I didn't realize, but we're not having those conversations. So it's like, we're all just shutting each other out and closing the door in each other's faces. And it's like, how are we ever going to move back to, hear everybody talk about new earth and unity consciousness and all this? And it's like, do you think we're going to get to new earth and unity consciousness when we're just canceling each other for,
Well, yeah, even on that, so many people are thinking that we're there now, but I feel like we're further from it than we ever have been. And we have moved into 5D energy, of that this new energetic paradigm and a new belief system, but so much of it is clouded in hope. That we hope that this new movement is going to be like the thing that will get us out of where we're at. And I know from a person with a disability point of view that you live with hope that there'll be change somewhere, and it just falls flat on its ass sometimes. And so really it is about having that collective conversation and understanding why we believe what we believe, or understanding why someone else believes what they believe, and not judging it before they've had a chance to explain themselves and educate you. It's at the moment we're in this Melbourne in lockdown, and do you guys have to wear masks all the time as well?
Yep.
Yeah. And just having conversations with a couple of my friends that are hearing impaired, and how they're being berated because they need to lip read, and they're not able to experience life like others because of people wearing masks, and people just basically cancelling them out as well,
I just feel like, what happened to like conversation? What happened to like, what if you just went into the heart chakra and you're like, I'm just going to have a conversation with this person about this? And it works both ways too. It's like, if someone thinks something I've posted isn't great, or wants to tell me about something that I might be missing, like have that conversation with me. But then we need to be doing the same thing when we see other people posting things that we're like, oh, hang on a minute, like, this could be seen in this way. There are things that I see that I find offensive, or that I find like problematic for whatever reason. And I know like a lot of the people that are posting that stuff, it's not coming from a place of, I'm going to post something really problematic and piss everybody off today. A lot of the time it just comes from a place of like, they thought it was funny from their life experience and their perspective. They thought that was funny. But, if you see it from a different perspective, it's like, actually, some people may not see it the way you saw it. And I think generally, I think that people don't really mean to offend each other. And there, of course, are people out there who are posting all this stuff to get a rise out of you. I would suggest not following those people. But most people, I think, are just like, they just don't know. They're just sharing, they're sharing their truth from their perspective of what they've experienced in this life so far. And, can we really, I don't know, can we really just cancel people because they don't know something?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Can we allow them to come back to a place of love?
Yes, amen to that. Yeah.
Or our final question, what advice do you have to give to the forest members? So that's a bunch of people. Some people have got businesses, some people don't have businesses, some people are super new into their spiritual adventures, some people like, fully like living the woo-woo life. What, as if you even, I'm like thinking, if you even like tap into the energy of the people that are there, what advice do you have for them / us?
I think, going back to like what we were saying about showing up, I think that's one of like the biggest pieces of advice that I give people, is like, just show up, and show up for your dreams, show up for your future self, but show up in the way that feels right for you. And like we've touched on some of these things in this call. We've talked about showing up for your business, showing up for your spiritual practice, showing up for your dreams, showing up for a swimming practice, all of these things that we've talked about. But it's like, find a way that you can show up that's, that works for you in your life. Like, not everybody's going to be a Paralympian swimmer. Not everybody can show up in that way. Like, not everyone has it in them to show up in that way. And not everyone's going to write like a book. Not everybody's going to write a whole book and be able to do that or want to do that. Like, a lot of people, I don't want to spend like 10 years writing a book. Like, that sounds horrendous. But it's like, what do you want? What do you want to achieve? And how can you be showing up for that every single day? Like, how can you do one thing to show up for yourself every day that feels like a way that you can do that for where you're at in your life right now? Even if it's just like, I'm just going to pull a card on what I need to know every day, and that's going to be my spiritual practice. Or maybe you're even in a situation where it's like just getting out of bed at the moment is showing up for your dreams. And it's like, if that's it, then that's where you're at. But I think it's about not being too easy on yourself as well. Like, what's a little bit of a push? What's a little bit more than what I have been doing right now, but not necessarily something that's going to feel so hard and so intense that you have to do it every day that you're not going to do it.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that so much.
I like the sort of like, you got to reach for it a little bit, but it's not so far out of your grasp that you're like, oh, I'm never going to be able to get this. It's like, just
stretch, it feels nice.
Yeah.
Stretch,
Yeah.
The athlete analogy again. So how can we find you online?
Okay, you can go to newagehipster.co, or you can just go into Google and type New Age Hipster, and I think I'm like one of the first ones that comes up for New Age Hipster. And pretty much everything's on my website, like all of the links to everything, all my social media and stuff is there too. I'm New Age Hipster 333 on Instagram, and that's where I hang out the most. I'm also Victoria Maxwell author on Instagram. That's where I share about my fiction books. And you can find out more about my fiction books at magicpizza.press. That's my indie imprint where I publish my fiction stuff.
So amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and your energy and just you. I love talking to you. So I'm so glad that everyone gets to watch this conversation or listen to this conversation as well.
Same. I love talking to you anytime. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. Okay, I'm going to hit pause. Got to tell everyone on the call exactly what I'm doing.